Welcome back to the City Current Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference and powering the good. And we love talking about MIFA, Metropolitan Interfaith Association. We're joined by our good friend, Sally Heinz. She is the president and CEO of MIFA. How are you doing, Sally?
I'm doing great, Jeremy. It's really nice to be with you this morning.
When you talk about MIFA, you do a lot, and we've had a chance on our end to volunteer with you all. We'll talk all about Meals on Wheels and the different programs that you all have, but give us a little bit of context. When you talk about the history and the origins of the organization, really cool storyline, a very important storyline for how the organization was started. So give us a little bit of history for MIFA.
Right. Well, MIFA was founded in 1968. Shortly following the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And there had been conversations in Memphis between religious leaders and community leaders, because together they really wanted to find ways that regular people, all of us, could impact and work on the social issues that were facing our community then. Sadly, many of them are with us still today: hunger, racism, homelessness, those really big sort of problems that a metropolitan area deals with.
Absolutely. And so talk about how you're able to work and bring people together, especially on the volunteer side, but how you're able to focus on lifting our community. So go ahead and dive into some of the programs and services.
Right. Well, it's really been important since the beginning of our founding, as I said, to involve the community and to use volunteers to tackle those problems. One of the ones that people can really see most clearly is our Meals on Wheels program that is really more than a meal, but we really rely on volunteers to help us get those meals out to over 1,000 homebound seniors in our community. And it's more than a meal because they're delivering the food, but also a visit and a conversation. Pre-pandemic, those conversations were maybe longer, but that connection and safety check is so important.
Go ahead and dive in deeper, because Meals on Wheels to me is one of my favorite things. And we have done it for like team meetings where we get the team together and go and deliver. But walk us through the process, because you show up early, everything, you've got the cold and the hot, and you have a route. And to your point, you get to interact. I mean, talk about how it works.
Well, it is so easy to do. We have one volunteer who says, I take my lunch at 9 in the morning, meaning he comes to MIFA and he picks up his meals at about 9. Now we're doing curbside pickup. So it's easy. You drive up, you tell a MIFA staff person your route number, and we get everything to your car. So you don't even have to get out of your car. And then you have a route of maybe 8 to 12 stops, either in houses or some senior high rises that you're visiting. And it's a great, you meet people and there are relationships that are formed, especially if you deliver once a month and do it regularly. And we have volunteers who have delivered for 15, 20, 25 years. MIFA has had this program since the early 70s. And those are real relationships. And not every volunteer opportunity gives you that. So it's really unique, I think, and every volunteer opportunity I know makes the volunteer feel as good as the person that they serve. That's a common thing we hear. But I do think Meals on Wheels is very special in that aspect, that once you have delivered a route, you feel terrific.
It definitely is the physical nourishment, obviously, for the individuals, but it's also too the spiritual and the emotional, because to your point, you're checking in on them, you're making sure they're okay. You get to build a relationship. They're so genuinely appreciative. It really is powerful. Talk about, though, how the pandemic has impacted it. And you mentioned the curbside pickup, but also too, the importance, because sadly, Memphis has a very, very high need for this help. And so talk about kind of the stats and how the pandemic has shifted things a little bit.
Right. Well, of course, when the pandemic started, we knew we focused on our mission. We knew it was important to continue to get meals to our senior neighbors. But we had to change the way we did it. A lot of volunteers stepped back. So and understandably, at the beginning of the pandemic, it's hard to remember pre-vaccine times, but there was a long wait there. So we went to 3 weekday deliveries instead of 5 days a week. And then we supplemented those deliveries with frozen or shelf-stable meals so that we were getting the same number of meals to our clients. But we also had to, at congregate sites, do a grab and go because people couldn't eat communally. MIFA delivers meals to congregate sites. So those clients would show up and we'd give them 5 meals to kind of a grab and go. We really relied on our My Phone Buddy program. This is another volunteer opportunity to call our clients. So we knew we were missing 2 visit days, and we have a volunteer opportunity where you can just call our more isolated senior clients and check on them. So we really, those days we weren't delivering, depended on those volunteers for that check-in. But you mentioned stats, Jeremy, and it is really distressing that Memphis has the highest rate of senior food insecurity of any US metropolitan area at 15.6%. And that's just really distressing. And we at MIFA are committed to doing what we can to fix that. We don't want to be known for that.
And so go ahead and lead into what you're doing here in the spring to help fix that.
Well, thanks to our generous community, we have already been able to begin to fund the MIFA Senior Hunger Growth and Innovation Fund. And we have great things in mind for that. We want to eliminate the local waiting list for the Meals on Wheels program. We want to recruit more volunteers because if we add clients, we're going to need more volunteers to help us do that. So it's a great way to get involved. We want to invest in equipment and capacity. So we might need more freezers in the kitchen. We might need more cooking equipment. And then the innovation part, I think, is the most exciting. We are going to hire a senior navigator who can help us develop partnerships and really delve into what would benefit our clients even more. So we want to partner perhaps with hospitals or perhaps with primary care givers where they can feed clients into our program. And then other innovations that would help the community as a whole, like recyclable packaging would be a great thing for us to do. Electric vehicles, there are all kinds of things that might be of side benefit to the community.
How can we plug in? Because obviously, as you mentioned, you're going to need increased funding, you're going to need increased volunteers. And as you're talking about innovation with like electric vehicles and, you know, recyclable materials, how can companies, how can others kind of reach out and say, hey, I want to start plugging in. I want to be a part of that innovation and that growth. How can we start plugging in?
Well, we're really going to start an awareness campaign this spring. So you'll start to hear more about it. But I do think if something, an individual certainly will need volunteers, a company, there might be something that really piques your interest specifically, like, hey, we want to fund that recyclable packaging, or we want to upgrade this for MIFA. So we'll have a list of ideas, you know, where people could really say, that's the thing that lights my fire and I want to help fund that.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important. I mean, when you look at where we are, obviously statistically, but what that means in life, I mean, these are people and loved ones that we need to support. And the fact that they're going hungry, that's something that we can solve as a community. We need to step up and really help solve this problem and do the right thing. And so carry that forward into some of the other things that you all do. You do a lot of assistance for families. You do a lot of other things. So go ahead and elaborate a little bit on some of the other programs.
Right. So in addition to our senior programs, we support the independence of families in crisis. And at MIFA, that might be anything from helping with a utility bill to actually, if a family's experiencing homelessness, getting them into shelter and then finally into permanent housing. And of course, the pandemic really created crisis for so many families in our community. And I have to say that the city and the county, along with collaborating partners, are operating the emergency relief program, and they have done a great job. MIFA is a collaborating partner, but I do have to give great kudos to the city and the county. They've done a great job of getting millions of dollars out into our community, but we know the need is still great. One of the things we are facing is that a lack of affordable housing. It's very difficult once a family has been evicted or been in shelter to find housing that is affordable and safe.
When you look at, what the families are going through with the pandemic and the mental health side of this, you're seeing it firsthand with the families, the individuals that you're serving, and obviously for your team as well. I mean, when you look at being on the support side and pouring into others, that can take a lot out of you emotionally to be able to make sure that you're there and doing all the right things. How has your team navigated and what have you seen, working with the individuals and families that you do in terms of the resiliency to be able to keep pushing forward and persevering and coming out on the other side?
That's a great question, Jeremy. And I'm really glad you asked about the MIFA staff, because they have just been incredible and never missed a beat during the pandemic. But you're right, it was difficult. And we experienced loss as a staff. Several staff members passed away during the pandemic, not necessarily due to COVID, but during that time when we couldn't be together and mourn together and support each other. So we did try to do some things for our staff. We made grief counseling available. We made sure to give our staff what we called refresh days, just some days off, and said, please unplug, please do what you need to do to take care of yourself. We were able to do that for our staff, but for many of families in our community, they don't get to take that day off from worrying about their next meal or worrying about the next bill. And I do think mental health is going to be, those issues and challenges for families are going to be with us long after this pandemic changes the definition to endemic, and our community is going to need to find ways to support those families.
Looking ahead, give us some of the things that you think are exciting opportunities. Obviously, we've talked about working and really kind of growing the Meals on Wheels program and doing a lot more there, including the innovations. Talk about some of the other things that, as you look forward, are exciting opportunities that we can plug into.
For volunteers, obviously the meals is our biggest. We have another program that's a little bit smaller called the Ombudsman program. And but it's really important. And that program supports the rights of residents of assisted living or long-term care homes. And that also is a volunteer-based program. So another way to plug in and go to the website and read about that. And it's just really important. Generally, I think for the community or ways for people to plug in, I think it's going to take all of us. And that is our corporate and our government and our nonprofit partners to continue to work together to solve affordable housing or to solve hunger. Those same things MIFA was dealing with years ago. I think one silver lining of the pandemic is that groups really have come together and that they have learned. I think nonprofits have learned we've got to have this support, and the government has learned, where would we be if nonprofits were providing this service that really popped up in terms of the pandemic? So I think the model is there. We just have to keep the will and the conversation going to finding solutions.
What are one or two of your main goals? Because we're still early on in 2022. So what are couple of your main goals for this year?
For MIFA?
For MIFA. It could be for you personally.
Or me. Well, for MIFA, the really eliminating food insecurity for homebound seniors would be maybe our top, but also accessibility for our family clients. We want to make sure once we went online that we are accessible and equitable for clients being able to get to our services. So that's a focus. And then our staff development and focusing on staff care and that work-life balance.
Nice. Wrap up with contact information, your website, social media, phone numbers. Where would you direct everyone to learn more and get involved with MIFA?
The best place to go is the website, and that is MIFA.org, MIFA.org. We have another website that is the MIFA Center for Community, and there are a lot of resources there about the issues that MIFA works in.
Well, Sally, as always, greatly appreciate all you and your amazing team do. Thank you for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeremy.